Welcome to the Cancer Clear and Simple podcast. I am your host, Joshua Wright, Community Project Coordinator in the Cancer Health Disparities Initiative at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Carbone Cancer Center. Today we are joined by none other than Mr. Gary Davis Jr. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, my man. Thank you, Mr. Joshua.
Let's kick it off, man. Can you tell us what you do professionally?
So my day job, my Clark Kent job, I should say, I actually work with, at Briar Patch, I'm a youth employment manager. My job is to help youth find purpose through employment. So in other words, I'm always trying to help youth find jobs, but not only find jobs, but to keep jobs. There's a saying that they say, you can give a man a fish and he can eat for a day. Or you can teach him how to fish and he can eat for a lifetime. And I'm just trying to help youth teach them how to fish.
I can respect that a whole lot. So I also know that you do contribute to the music scene in Madison. Can you talk about some of the things you do to contribute to that?
Oh, yeah. So I've actually been doing it, Joshua, for like 25 years. I've been in the music scene. I'm one of the first, there was, of course, artists before me, but I'm one of the first hip hop promoters in Madison, Wisconsin. And urban music.
What kind of, I'm just going to try to see what your musical favorites are. Can you give us a top 5 of kind of your genres?
Yeah, my favorite is, of course, gospel. Gospel is my first, and I know that's hard to, because of the music, people might consider me backsliding, but I'm very much know who my father is, and so gospel music is probably my first. My second is R&B. My third is hip hop. My fourth is country, because I am from Arkansas originally. Then my fifth would probably be, I get off into a little bit, rock. Yeah.
Okay. And then drop a couple of artists that you got in rotation these days.
Well, now, Joshua, you got to be careful because there are certain artists that like I always, it's one of those questions that I always ask. Are we, at cookouts, that's the most important question, is are we listening to the R, aka R. Kelly, or are we not listening to R. Kelly? But one of my favorite artists, Chris Brown. Let's see. As far as gospel, Maverick City music, they're like probably the ones I'm rocking with hardest. Country wise, Jason Aldean, Brett Young is a good one, and then hip hop. There's so many, but I don't know, man. That's a tough one. That's another one of those cookout things. Are we dealing with Drake or are we dealing with Kendricks? So that, and yeah, and rock, and as far as rock goes, that's probably the easiest one that I know, and that's Led Zeppelin, and that's because it has a lot of, that urban influence, at least in my ear. So yeah.
That is very interesting to know about you, good sir. Can you share about can you share with our listeners how we met?
Well, so first of all, I have to salute Joshua because a lot of people don't know Joshua like I do. Maybe Michelle and a few other people, but they know him better than I do. Met Joshua when I was first diagnosed with cancer. And the crazy thing is my friends were throwing a benefit and they're like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And there's this guy who is going to come and speak about cancer. And I'm like, man, this is a benefit. What is y'all talking about? So Joshua had met those guys. It was actually one of my friends, his name was Breed. And so it was the day of my benefit. Joshua showed up, had a whole bunch of literature And then we all sat around and, he got up on the stage and gave a presentation. And I don't even really want to call it a presentation. He gave us some facts, some stone cold, true hard facts about it. And from that day on, Joshua has been my brother. Like anything he asked, and I hate to say it, even if it's something that I wouldn't want to do, I'm never going to tell this man no, just for the sake of what he did. Like he had did a couple of events. Joshua was there. Then one day we were talking and he realized that, man, this guy loves to talk. And he told me about the African-American Cancer Advocacy Board that they were putting together over at the UW, and asked me would I be interested in being a part of it. And I said, absolutely. And as they say, we've been rocking ever since. So
Yeah, you definitely went over a great part of the story. And I just want to say that it has been an honor getting to know you over these years. And it was very special to be a part of that benefit, because not many people also talk about their journey as openly as you have. And so getting a chance to support you, even though it was through my job, was just a coming together of different communities and networks that made this journey very special and meaningful in terms of how I've been doing this work through this professional way, and to meet you, somebody who has their own cancer, a journey and experience to talk about, but is doing that in such a powerful way. So you were
so
mentioning the African American Community Advocacy Board. What things have you collaborated on with doctors or staff at the Carbone Cancer Center?
well, so I've done a lot with the African American Cancer Community Advocacy Board. But one of the most rewarding things I did was we were able to do an event with PCEC, which is another prostate
Yeah, the
group.
Prostate Conditions Education Council.
Yes, it was another group. And we actually did a Father's Day / prostate screening. Now, a lot of you, and I will share that too, is like I lost my father to prostate cancer. And it was actually 18 months before the first time I went to the doctor that I realized that I had cancer. So that was the significance of Father's Day, the Father's Day part. The second part too was that it was Juneteenth, and I was feeling like, hey, we're gonna have more men in the area, so let's do that. And some of the other things is I've went to DC with prostate, being a representative for the Wisconsin chapter for prostate cancer. Basically, you go there for a whole weekend and you get a whole bunch of information, and then you bring it back, and you just want to make your state aware of all the things they're doing. Another thing, place that I was able to go to the AUA conference out in San Antonio for 2004, which is the American Urologists Association conference. Another thing that I was able to do was to go to Milwaukee and do an event out there. And
Was that the Wisconsin Cancer Summit?
Yes. I was able to go out there and to speak and to share my story. And I just want to piggyback real quick on something that you said, Joshua. You said partner with, and that's a great word. But I like the word team, because one thing about it is with the African American Cancer Cab, I feel like we all play a part in it. And a partnership is great. We do have a partnership, but I look at these guys as my team. You know, if I'm playing running back, There's people in the front blocking for me. There's a person who's grabbing the ball and handing it off to me. I consider you and Dr. Ward as being the quarterbacks. We got one who's going to stay in the pocket and pass, and then we got another one who's going to run the option. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I truly say that humbly because you know as well as I do, sometimes I might be over here and my team will pull me and say, hey, Gary, come on back over here. We need you. So I appreciate you guys. So yeah, definitely.
There was a lot to unpack in what you just shared because
I'm
you've
sorry.
been many different places. That's good. That's good. We're having a good conversation here. And I just wanted to clarify a couple of things too, because for that Father's Day, Juneteenth prostate cancer screening event, again, just the years that we've been able to work together, you were able to help me in my first opportunity to be screened using the
Yes.
prostate specific antigen test. And
Mm,
so the important part, and I had been working in this job for 9 years, and that was the first time that I was more on the eligible end of things because as we
mm,
know and talk about prostate cancer for African American men, we are at higher risk. And so it's
mm,
very important for us to take that first step in getting the baseline to just see where we
mm,
are at. And from there, every subsequent PSA that we receive is going to help us have an understanding of whether or not we should go further with that screening. So I just owe you a thank you for continuing to be on what you're on is an advocate and providing those skill sets that you have with event planning and coordination and using that in the advocacy space because I don't know how much longer I would have had to wait or been just, it was just a nice confluence of things that came together. And so that was one thing, but you're talking about being able to connect with the doctors in the UW Carbone space and go to these conferences. And also, you're kind of circling back around and giving more context and substance to, those in your life that have been impacted by cancer. So can you talk a little bit about the family history side of things? You were talking and saying that your father had been passed away, and then you learned that you were diagnosed.
yeah, and I'll jump into that real quick, but let me just go. One thing, I got bumps, I got goosebumps from that, and I know I'm not cold where I'm at. So I truly appreciate that them roses that you just gave me because I never knew that about you, Joshua. I swear I never knew that. And the great thing about that event is we were able to get Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson, and Bayer to donate $75,000 worth of tests. Each one of those tests were 7,500. So we were able to do 100 tests or $750. I'm sorry. Each test was $750, and we had 75,000. So we were able to do 100 tests. We didn't reach that, but we did get there. Another thing is that I also was able to do to go to the Spores event in
So
Los Angeles.
okay,
Huh?
so the specialized programs of research excellence.
Yes, yes. I was able to go. I actually went with my doctor to Los Angeles and I got to be on a panel and to sit there. And that was a pretty big moment too. But circling back with my family history, my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And the crazy thing about that was my dad was everything. I didn't grow up with my father, but he was everything. When you look at your father, he's a superhero. And he didn't have to be a superhero in the household. You know what I mean? Because like I said, I wasn't raised by him. I was raised by my mother. But he is a prime example and one of the not the only, definitely not the only reason, but one of the big reasons was that my father didn't get treatment. He didn't like he was late stages and he didn't get chemo because of the stories that he heard about chemo. My father was a man who was like, I don't want to lose my hair. He had a head full of white hair. He was too cool for school and he loved himself, if you know what I mean. He'd be in that mirror. And but he wasn't educated correctly. He didn't know about the advancement of medicine and the steps that they were taking and the things that were going on. So yeah, he did that. Another thing was my stepmother had passed away from cancer also. So those were like the first two times that I ever really knew. I mean, I probably had some grandparents, but grandparents were built different back in those days. They probably had cancer and everything else, but you couldn't tell that they had cancer. They have cancer and they were still pulling motors out of cars, cooking Sunday meals every day. So yeah.
I can understand that perspective.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the people that have been impacted by cancer in your life. So how do you approach the conversation with your peers about cancer and cancer screening?
Well, one of the things about that I try to do is, first of all, be honest, and be direct. I had to sit and think about it. I remember the very first time I ever advocated to somebody was my best friend Will. He's the very first person that I called. And if you really we'll have to do another podcast, or maybe we'll hit it to this at part two. But just to tell you, like, the way it went down for me, it was not a great experience. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna be kind of long-winded. So I'm gonna tell you exactly why I started advocating. The very first time I went to the doctor's office, well, the urologist, they wanted to give me a biopsy. And this doctor did not have any bedside manner. So actually he was just talking to me and he was like, yo, whoa, this is the roughest prostate that I ever worked on and all this stuff, right? And so to hear that type of thing, like I tell people, I wasn't knocked out. I was just numbed up. So I could hear everything that he was saying. So anyways, I leave there. And that same doctor that had no bedside manners was supposed to call me a week later. Of course, he called me and told me, he said, I'll call you in 3 days and tell you about your diagnosis. And so he told me about my diagnosis. He said, yes, you have cancer, just what I thought. Didn't ask me if I was sitting down, anything. It was horrible. He just blurted it out, basically. Come. He said, I'll call you in a week and let you know which stage you're in. And when that happened, I'm sitting here waiting, and I never received a call from the doctor. So I'm like, okay. But I had a doctor's appointment with the specialty doctors. You go for the surgeon first, the radiologist, all of this. No, I think it's radiologist, then surgeon, whatever, and then chemo, whatever. So I went to the doctor's office, not even knowing my stage, not realizing that I was supposed to know my stage. And my brother, who worked at Tomotherapy, which is a cancer research company that does pinpoint, for radiation machines. He would write the manuals, help write the manuals. And you could pinpoint, radiation through, instead of having to radiate the whole body, neither here nor there. He also worked at Exact Sciences. So he knew all the questions asked the doctor. So he gets in there, comes in there with his notebook ready to fire all these questions at the doctor. And the doctor looks at him and says, we can't help him. And my brother's like, are you sure? It's this. And the doctor looked at my brother. He said, you don't know, do you? And my brother said, no, what? And he says, by definition, your brother is stage 4 cancer. And my brother said, what? He's like, by definition, since it's left the prostate and ended up in other areas, it's stage 4. And that destroyed my brother. Like my brother, we were latchkey kids. So my brother was always the one who protected us. That, my mom was off doing working and trying to make a living. And so my brother has always been our protector. So he couldn't, and I looked at him and I said, bro, you can't do nothing for me. I have to fight this on my own. And he was always able to correct or fix or change whatever it was. But this was a fight that I had to fight. So I looked at him and I was like, let's go. And he's like, no, I got questions. I said, well, I'm done. You know what I mean? Because I know what this is. I didn't go out crying or anything. Circle back and I went and called my best friend, Will. And I said, yo, bro, the doctors just told me, that I have cancer and it's stage 4. And he broke down. And so we're having this conversation and I'm just like, look, I just need you to take care of my daughters. And, I trust you to give them fatherly advice and always just be there at the biggest moments. And then he left. He didn't left. We hung up. And so, come 3 years later, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, pancreatic cancer, which was a monster. Like it ripped him quick. So I've always shared that with my friends. And one of the things that I've always wanted to share was because I never wanted people to go through what I went through. See, and I say this so humbly without 1 ounce of arrogance, but I was built for this because of the time my mother, a single woman, invested in us. I seen the resilience in her. I seen the strength in her. I seen those things. So it always made me know that, as they're saying, the world is cold but fair. So I never candy coated anything when it came to it. Never, not once. I never was like, why me, poor me? But I always wanted people to know, like, this is what's going on. And so, like I said, that doctor, even though was so rude or didn't have bedside manners, it showed me like the inconsideration that these people have for human life. And I'm not saying that in a disrespectful way, but the only story I've ever played in my head, Joshua, is if I was a white man, would this have happened? So I've always played that role of, that's why I've always gave it to the people that I deal with, like raw. I've always been an open book because I was taught at that moment, like, this is how it's going to be.
Wow. You started to talk about some of the people in your life that were part of your support circle. Can you talk about others and how they supported you in your journey after experiencing these things?
Well, yeah, and there was, but yes, the two biggest were my brother and my sister-in-law. My brother, like I said, he worked at tomotherapy. He was in exact sciences, but he was also, like I said, he played that role of father when my father left. And then my sister-in-law, who was his wife, she's a registered nurse for 28 years, like a charge nurse. She wasn't just somebody. She had some credentials, but they were probably hands down them. And before Will got sick, he was quite a big pitcher. He played a pretty big pitcher, but my biggest support system was God Himself. That was my faith and my understanding. Because, like I always speak, if you know your purpose, and I was really blessed, Joshua, because my purpose was revealed right in front of me from the first time I told somebody, or first couple of times that I told people about what I was going through. And I always was like, yo, it made me feel good, because something that was like, cancer wasn't going to kill me. You know what I mean? It was something that was gonna empower me. And not to say like something weird, like cancer was my superpower, but it was something that gave me strength. And I had like so many people because like, I was a music promoter in this town and coworkers and everybody like, I always call myself the most popular loner, but my people showed up and showed out. They showed me love and gave me so much support. You know, so if I was going to throw somebody else in that whole agenda, of course, my mom has always been my rock, and my aunts come from a family, we call them the sisterhood, I'm sorry. And it's all my aunts, and they all were interchangeable. That means if you was cutting up, they could correct you. Any one of them, they never play that game, but they were all supportive of me. So, and then my doctor, Dr. McNeil, like he was one of the first people that gave me hope that I was going to make it. I mean, God was the first, and then he was probably the second. So, yeah.
And what things are you looking forward to doing in the future with your raising of awareness?
Well, so like I said, I lost my best friend in the whole entire world. I get emotional, but I also got the biggest smile on my face when I talked to him about it. And his name was Will, aka Willie Lee Washington, but Will Washington. When he passed, but like when he was going through his benefit, people always put strong on the end of your name. They always say, Bob Strong or Live Strong or whatever strong. But he was more than strong. He had a power about himself. And when I say this, I'm not just saying this. He was the kind of guy who walked in a room and everybody wanted to be his best friend. And I'm not just saying that. Anybody that knows Will would agree. And so his hashtag was power. So I would always say willpower. That was his hashtag. Well, my nickname in the music scene is Gary Knowledge. So I took those, and this is my tribute to him, but it's going to be Knowledge and Willpower Network. And what we're going to focus on, and I say we, because like they say, when somebody's gone, they take a piece of you with them, but when you live, you take a piece of them with you. So everything I do, I do because of him and myself. But we really want to focus on the caregivers. I don't think people understand how important that support system is. I was explaining to people that when you deal with a support system and when you deal with a support system and they have to make choices, like maybe taking care of the kids or handling other things, it's that person who's fighting that needs them the most. And I just want to try to help break down some of those barriers. If it's about transportation, if it's about feeding, if it's about even helping kids with homework. I want to try to help knock down the barriers so that person who is being the support system is able to be more available for the person that's going through that trying time, if you understand what I'm saying.
I do. And I really like the name, Knowledge and Willpower. That's very catchy. And I see that it's going to do good things, do great things.
Mm.
So as we're coming and winding down here, what message would you like to leave our listeners and future guests?
One of the most important things is learning how to advocate. If you go to the doctors and you say, hey, and they say, I got a pain in my leg or a pain in my back or shoulder, And just because a doctor tells you you're okay, that's advocate for yourself, because you know what? They're not always going to be able to see everything or figure out everything. So you have to learn how to advocate for yourself. And that was one of my biggest things. See, 18 months before I was diagnosed, I was going to the doctors every single day of, well, not every single day, but at least once a month for 18 months. And they kept on telling me, oh, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. One doctor even told me come back in, because it was 45 when I started doing it, told me come back in 5 years. If I'd have came back in 5 years, I'd have been coming back in a pine box. So it's always about advocating for yourself. And the second one is that cancer is not a death sentence. I learned that I always tell people I didn't learn how to live until I was faced with death. Because we always say, I'm living my best life. Yeah, I get pains, I get tired at times, but I truly am living my best life, because you know what? I wake up every day and I never take 1 minute for granted. Before, I was living on borrowed time and I didn't even know it. Just going, like, when my grandkids get up and say, Papa, let's go to the park. And I used to say, we'll do that tomorrow. Not realizing that one day my tomorrows weren't going to come. So those are the two biggest things is, advocate for yourself and never take any moment for granted. And always put God first.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate you for sharing everything that you've told and shared with us tonight. I am going to be continuously grateful to work with you, work by your side to do this work in the community and make sure that people have a sense of understanding of each moment, as you so eloquently told us. So with that, I'd like to just say thank you for listening, and we hope to see you next time.
Joshua, can I just say one last thing?
Absolutely.
Just one last thing to all my brothers, all my sisters, white, black, please go get tested. Go get tested. It takes all of a couple of minutes. The hardest thing we do is procrastinate. That's the hardest thing we do. But I just want to tell you, go get tested. There's a saying, and I always love to say it. You'll either pay the farmer or you'll pay the doctor. And I can promise you the doctor is going to cost a lot more. So eat right, live right, and be right. Thank you for that moment.
Thank you so much for joining the Cancer Clear and Simple podcast. Please tell your family, friends, and loved ones to tune in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.